our Uber moment was we were spending too many midnight hours looking at data rules, shoving information to a financial model, and generating investment memos. And then we were showing up an investment committee and making a lot of embarrassing mistakes. So we just said, we had our Uber moment and said, there has to be a better way. And so we built the software for ourselves. And when we built the software, we just said, what's wrong with the way investments are done? In essence, what we're seeing is that there's a siloed thinking. Siloed in terms of I raise money, that's one process. I invest the money. Oh, I gotta go in now, manage the assets. And each organization creates their own processes, their own set of tools that create more data silos. Our largest customer today has 1.6 million spreadsheets that float around 1,200 people. They originate in 30 countries across 8 asset classes. And now, is a mistake going to happen? Absolutely. Does it take a lot of time to get that done? Absolutely. And so what we're finding is that the complexity of investing is going through the roof. In order to get the returns that you folks are promising, we found that our customers have doubled in terms of how many countries they're investing in and how many geographies. It's gone from roughly 10 to 15%, almost 30% of their LPs and GPs are now diversifying. That actually adds even more complexity to this mess. And so we just said, listen, this is just not acceptable. There's got to be a better way. By the time you hit fund 3, the productivity actually went down. So this is a big problem because you're facing, lower fees from your LPs, and you got rising costs and more complexity. So that's the perfect storm. So we said, let's change the thinking. This is actually not disparate functions of raising money, deploying money, and managing the assets. It's actually a cycle. And every time you do each of those functions, you should be centralizing that data. You should be systematizing those workflows, and you should be creating a single source of truth. And what I'm going to share with you are 3 or 4 case studies, and then Jeff and I will have a conversation with some questions from you in the audience as well as from him. But I want to actually show you that there is a modern way, there is a Uber way of investing and managing assets and producing superior returns. So what I'm showing you here is not marketing material. What I'm showing you are the actual live case studies of general partners that invest in infrastructure, energy, and power, and real estate on some of the actual results that they're seeing by digitalizing their investment lifecycle management. The investment lifecycle means from the day it's an idea, to the day you sign to notice to proceed to construct it, to manage it, to by the time you dispose it, refinance, those are all lifecycle decisions over 30 years. And what we're doing is just automating those mundane processes, centralizing the data, systematizing workflows, and there are real benefits that are coming out of that. So the first case study that I want to talk to you about is a US firm that invests in solar and wind. They raise money in the capital markets by forming a REIT, Real Estate Investment Trust, and that's their LP source of money. And their issue was that they had 5 portfolio companies in which they were procuring projects, wind projects. And they were spending, the statistic I had, about 80-90% of the time actually collecting the data, systematizing it so that all these 5 portfolio companies, they could see, how to report that information. Well, they were getting 0 time to analyze the data. In 4 months of after using our platform, they finally inverted where they're spending 90% of their time actually analyzing the data. And what they're able to do is find portfolios and projects that were underperforming from a cash flow perspective. They were finding ones that were overperforming. They're able to take that and feed that back to their portfolio company and say, listen, if you want to continue building projects this way, we're going to give you a lower cost of capital. A higher cost of capital. If you're going to use this combination of technology, we're going to actually give you a higher developer fee. So by just taking that data and centralizing it, they're able to gain almost full percentage point in IRR. And this is just the beginning of the relationship, the beginning of using the platform. So it's just being able to analyze the data and look at how to financially squeeze more margin out of a particular project. We find today that there's about 300 basis point leakage from an IRR from the day it was brought to investment committee. We've been tracking projects for 5 years now, and usually end up with about 3% basis less than where you started. And there's a much of a distribution curve. And so all we're able to do is to say, listen, we can give you the underlying reasons why, then it's up to the organization to figure out how to tighten behavior. So this is what we call being better stewards, of money that we raise and deploy. The second case study is an interesting combination of actually an Asian LP looking for a good developer and a developer trying to raise money. And as we all know, that process is very inefficient. It's the toughest part of our job, is raising capital or deploying capital. And so what we were able to do was halfway through this cycle, the developer actually took all of their data and put it on our platform, all their pipeline, as well as their portfolio. And it was again across 8 different geographies and 2 different technologies, EV charging stations and wind power plants, and a little bit of solar. By centralizing their data, they were able to open this up to this particular LP in Asia. And what would have taken 6 to 9 months to go through diligence, they finished in 3 months. So they contracted the diligence cycle and the fundraising cycle by 3 months. And both sides really appreciated that transparency and traceability of what the pipeline was, what the assets were. So the developer actually was able to raise capital in this way. The GP in this case was able to raise the capital at 35 basis points more favorable than he would have just his normal methodologies. Again, 35 basis points, all every nickel, every dime adds up to more profit dollars that you can use to gain market share. The third and final case study I'd like to talk to you about is a global infrastructure fund. And this one I really want you guys to pay attention to. This one is, I think, what I call the modern investment methodology. Now, this is still goals and aspirations because we just signed this customer, but I think he's got this right. So the way he taught us to structure the contract was he's going to give licenses to the LPs, he's got 11 LPs. He obviously has licenses to use our software within the GP, and he's got licenses to provide this to his portfolio companies. He owns 5 the company, the GP owns 5 portfolio companies outright by them, and they invest in assets in infrastructure. And by getting everybody to buy in, I think we did a great job from a leadership perspective, saying we're all going to use the same platform. We're going to have 100% transparency of data and traceability of what we're working on. He aligned the incentive systems across the board. And his goal is to stay at roughly about 15 to 20 people and 4x of AUM. Just imagine this cost structure that he's going to have to compete in the marketplace. Imagine the agility to make decisions, the ability to raise more money. So a year from now, we'll come back and we'll see what kind of progress we've made. But I think this is the way we envision the company, is that we have a seamless transaction from LP to GP to projects in a seamless way where data is transparent, traceable to all parties so that we can all gain confidence. So with that one, I will leave this with almost what we heard from McKinsey, or we planned it that way, but McKinsey's quote basically is that, hey, if we manage data, if we centralize it, from front office, we would have front office, back office, and mid office, because they're all highly related, that you can actually grow more profitably. So with that, I'll start with Jeff, and we'll begin to take some questions. Thank you.
All right, well, let me ask you a question, Gretchen. Thank you for showing some of the value propositions and real life case studies. I guess my first question is, why aren't all firms doing this right now?
Well, people aren't doing it because I think that, as I mentioned, that this is a 30-year-old technology we're using. We're all used to email and Excel and people and passing stuff around. So a lot of us, when we had BlackBerries, really didn't know that a smartphone existed. So it's a function of exposure of this new methodology, but there is a better way. So that's, I would say, just this, what we produced was a bit by accident. We were an investment banking firm, and we solved our own problem, but we solved something the industry, I think, didn't know they needed. And there was a better way. That's one. There is entrenched behavior too, in terms of if you've done something that's worked for you for 30 years, why do something different? Change is hard.
Right.
So I think some of that is just inertia. Changing methodology and exposing a different way of doing business.
I guess the next question is, big theme for everyone right now is digitalization. What does it mean to you, and how is Mercatus using digitalization to benefit for its customers and partners out there?
Yeah, digitalization is a probably big overused word. Our definition is pretty simple. If it's manual, if it's labor intensive, if it's competitive, why are we doing it? How do we automate that? How do we make it more efficient? How do we reduce errors? There's a company that is similar to us, who actually we hired several of their executives. They had a nice IPO, so we thought we'd bring a little bit of that good luck into our company. They automated the loan origination process for mortgages. And they asked the same question: why are we manually looking at every single, loan application? It's just automating the whole process. So digitalization for us is a simple answer of just taking repetitive processes and applying digital.
But I think also just on digitalization itself, when we're speaking about renewables, there's a real-time basis to a need to know about how your assets are performing itself, or maybe not even renewables itself if you're doing a greenfield project itself. So you actually provide a real-time basis look at where the performance of your assets are.
Yeah, absolutely. So for us, asset management is probably where we think the epicenter of the data problem is. And so our customers are able to take either their physical infrastructure assets or real estate assets or renewable energy assets. It's really agnostic to the technology.
Mm-hmm.
But we tie those sensors and all the data that's coming out in terms of what kind of, either it's electrons or it's some sort of something saved or something earned, we just tie that to the financial model. So dynamically. And so the ability to bring that data, the real power of that is to compare that to what was committed to and hold those parties accountable. And just by tying those two together and providing a feedback loop, you change organizational behavior.
And then I guess just as we're speaking about asset management itself, we're going to be talking later in another panel tomorrow about ESG, but one of the other unique features that Mercantile has is ESG monitoring itself and reporting. Could you speak a little bit about that?
We look at ESG as a dashboard.
Right.
You're trying to come up with a set of KPIs so you can convince whoever you raise money from that you're actually meeting the targets that you said you were. So what we found with most ESG, and a lot of people promote ESG as a product, but it's basically a static PDF that's put in there and saying, please open up on the other side of the password. We need to think of this as how is it traceable? How is it fully transparent? So that you can really say, I actually trust your ESG reporting. So our platform allows the same capability, which is create your ESG KPIs that you've agreed to, but give all the parties the ability to go and drill down to the document, if you want, the PPA, and actually say, yeah, I actually believe what you're giving me. So that's our contribution to supporting ESG. And our first exercise actually came when TPG invested in their profits, and as TPG, the company, had to use an ESG metric. We actually worked with them really closely to at that time we didn't know what was called ESG, but we were working on a dashboard to help them illuminate how they're having ESG impact.
I mean, by the way, for everyone here who's in Asia, just the European Commission right now is considering right now that all asset managers now start reporting both on sustainability and with regards to ESG. So this is something that I think you should keep in mind as you start looking at your fund about how do you manage ESG and how do you report it itself. So another question. So as a Silicon Valley CEO, which is pretty glamorous, you're a rock star. What do you see as innovation? What part of innovation is exciting you the most right now?
Well, I'm not sure if I'm a rock star, but I'll disagree with that. I'm one of the boring guys from Silicon Valley.
Boring's good, actually.
Boring is good. And part of being boring is saying that technology requires an evolutionary step. There's a lot of people spending a lot of money on artificial intelligence, machine learning, and they'll come, but the internet existed in 1962. Yeah. And so it takes time, so we're not saying we don't believe in that technology. We believe there's a bit of buzz around it, buzzwords, but you need to basically build a core foundation. Our core foundation is you have to centralize the data, which is like buying a house, you have to have the plumbing connected, otherwise you buy a house with one water, any water coming in, that's not very good. So part of our first step is centralize the data, and the second thing is systematize the workflow. So if you connect your people through better collaboration and workflow, And if you centralize the data, you now have the ability to do powerful analytics. Part of that analytics is what processes are repetitive. As soon as you see a repetitive process, that's when you apply artificial intelligence, machine learning. A lot of people skip those first two fundamental foundational steps. So today we're doing boring stuff, providing the basic plumbing for data, the basic connectivity to upgrade email to a more modern way of collaborating, which still leverages it, but it's just, we have to fundamentally bring two basic things to this industry to have the foundation to build on these newer technologies.
So in other words, just, I guess as an asset manager, you're optimizing your communication and then communication with your portfolio companies and with your investors and everyone else into a single platform that maximizes the communication flows.
Yeah, absolutely, and then once you really look at the patterns in your data, then you can begin to apply some of these machine learning technologies to even do this some of the analysis. So it's a journey, and I think if you look at some of the work that McKinsey's done, they've also shown a very similar progression, in that you got to do these basic homework steps here first.
And then as you start, your focus is on the asset management, the real asset sector itself, and as you look at that going forward 3 to 5 years out, you have your solution, but where are you going with your partners, the asset managers themselves, 3 to 5 years out down the road, and how are you going to be able to help them create value?
Well, I think what we're hearing from our customers, interestingly, is that they don't really compete with each other, even though they do compete. So they want to be able to seamlessly trade. They want to be able to take projects that either done a greenfield or outright acquisition, create portfolios. Somebody wants to go and say, I want to bundle these and sell them off. Somebody wants to take us into a liquid market. Somebody wants to take the liquid market, set asset portfolios and bring it back to private. And so our vision is that we have all the assets in the world that are infrastructure and renewable energy and real estate and so on. And the ability why we left our name Mercatus is that we're Mercatus marketplace. So we allow people to go back and forth from the liquid market to the fixed market and allow those transactions to happen amongst our customers. So that's a few years off.
So you're just about the market itself, so the application, it's not just only for asset managers, but presumably engineering firms, et cetera, and how they're building out. Real estate, I think you're also in-house as an asset class?
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole ecosystem that exists around the general partner, right? There are people that are in the legal firm, there are investment banking firms, there are technology firms, there are construction firms, there's engineering firms, as you said. They all have to collaborate as part of this ecosystem, so they all can hand off this platform.
Is there any questions right now? Hold on 1 second.
Good afternoon. Is it work?
It's working.
Yeah. Mr. Patel, I mean, what you have just described is very unique and very interesting. But where I play, I represent a fund called IDB Infrastructure Fund 2, which is an infrastructure fund sponsored by the Islamic Development Bank, which is the World Bank for Islamic countries. So I'm long away from Silicon Valley. We hear about you guys on the television now, reading the newspaper. We're in the difficult markets like Nigeria, Bangladesh, Pakistan. And I'm very curious to hear how you build the house, because we are in the paddy field. We're building power stations, building toll roads, where only recently people are getting smartphones. And every new construction is different, even though they're next door to each other. And the communication between people are still, I can send memos after memos, but the guy who's building my cooling station, cooling tower in some by the river in Pakistan isn't gonna respond to my memo. I have to either go there or pick up the phone and
You have to use WhatsApp.
WhatsApp. So what are the steps that do you think that I could build the house that you talked about? What would be the steps? And can you help us to do that?
Well, I think what you're describing is what most of our customers are doing, right? They're trying to deploy capital into a lot of technologies, into a lot of different countries, and they're chasing where there's the highest returns. So they're finding the same markets Interestingly enough, a little known tidbit is that TPG is our largest investor, and their largest LP is IFC World Bank. And so the whole thesis was, how do you take large buckets of capital and deploy it into developing countries?
Oh yeah, I'm very, this morning I was listening and I was so happy to hear that the gentleman who represents Omar's at all the time to find schools and take a year to invest. That's music to my ear, because that's where I'm going to sell and make 20%, or he's going to take 6%. I'm very happy for that. I'm making tons of money, but I want to make sure that I also bring those countries. I have a responsibility towards my constituents, which is the Islamic countries, to bring them to the up to speed. I'm not only investing my return metrics based on helping the country generate employment, good governance, and also finance the projects that others also want to finance. So I have multiple of return criteria, tangible and intangible. So that's why I was interested.
So your question is, how do you get the people in the field
Yes.
to change behavior? That's the $64 million question. Change is hard. Sorry.
I think I can answer that. So, because of 25 years of experience working with portfolio companies, it's just one word: incentivization. You know, people need to make a living. They need to feed their family. They need to eat themselves. If you incentivize someone or penalize them if they don't fill out the proper documentation, they'll get it pretty quickly or they'll be out of a job. And so the bottom line is once this becomes integrated in there, and once people are incentivized to fill this out, it becomes easier for everybody. It makes that employee who doesn't really want to be doing it much easier, because then he doesn't have to catch up on paperwork because he's missed 2 months with you. So it's all about incentivizing people and aligning and training people for the change itself. And every organization goes through that, whether it's in a developing country or developed country itself. But it's all about incentivization, in my opinion. I don't know.
You brought up a good case study. We do have a customer that originates not necessarily in, I think the problem is not just in your countries, but it's everywhere. But he set up an incentive system. It's simple. If you want to just send me your data room and let me process it, I'll take 45 days to give you an answer. If you input it in Mercatus, I'll give you a license and username, I'll give you an answer in 24 hours. So it's setting up the incentive, right, to be able to offer them something, maybe a lower cost of capital, something that makes them a little happier, but if they change their behavior a little bit. So I think you hit the nail on the head.
Any other questions? Great. Well, thank you very much, Haresh. This was very good. And thank you, everyone. We're on a break right now, and we'll see you shortly.
Thank you.